The American Civil War is known throughout the nation. We see it in Hollywood movies, we hear about it in school. In this time period, tensions were high throughout the whole United States. People would argue that tensions were more prominent in West Virginia, a state that was divided by East and West, the Union, and the Confederacy. The point of this presentation is to understand the pressures that the soldiers, their families, and civilians had living in the western part of a state that was divided in Virginia. My ancestor, Stephen C. Davis II, was enlisted in the Union Army for the state of West Virginia. He was 30 years old at the time. He had a wife at home and at least 4 children. His wife's name was Jemima Kelly Davis. And his 4 children were 3 boys and 1 girl. He owned a farm where his family probably resided on the home front when he went off to war. Many soldiers who joined the war effort would have had to leave their families, just as Stephen Davis. They would not only have to deal with the pressure of the war, they would also be concerned about their family's well-being, being able to take care of the farm at home. And they would also be concerned of battles arising where their families were located. The Davises' family farm was located in Doddridge County. This could have been an area in West Virginia with very high tensions and pressures. This was due to the fact that they were what most would say the central part of the Civil War. Life for Jemima Davis would have been hard during the war. She would have had to take care of the farm and her 4 children without the help of her husband. Despite the fact there was more than enough work to be done on farms, many women wanted to support the war in more ways. According to author Karen Zienert, the number of casualties that came from the Civil War were worse than expected, and doctors needed all the help they could get to treat the wounded. Many men were reluctant to have women help in this department. But many people did not believe women would be able to handle the horrors that were occurring with this war. In the end, women assisted doctors and the wounded soldiers. Jemima Davis, my ancestor, may have been one of these many women who helped aid those wounded soldiers. For women who were single and not married, it was difficult to find any work. The North already had so many laborers and employees. There was no demand. According to author Karen Zinet, many single women located in the North found jobs working for the government, while women who were in the South primarily found jobs in sewing. My ancestors, along with many others who were married, were viewed to stay home and take care of the household. There were many battles fought in West Virginia. This included the Battle of Philippi and the Battle of Harper's Ferry. It was a crucial spot in the Civil War. According to historian Richard R. Duncan, the most troublesome area for Grant would be Western Virginia, as he says, a leg that refused to be held down. Grant was a general on the Confederate side of the Civil War. West Virginia, from the beginning, would not give their support to the Confederacy, and this weakened the Confederates. This put pressure and tension between the two sides of Virginia. Throughout these battles, soldiers needed shelter, food, and water. Though the government did provide some of these necessities, they weren't always enough. In many cases, civilians and families had their house open to the wounded and gave soldiers as much food and water as they could. According to historian William Davis and James Robertson, the Valley's residents also gave invaluable help in taking care of thousands of sick and wounded. During the opening stages of the conflict, medical care in the Army was extremely limited, and until organized, the people assisted in any way they could. This is a photo of the Battle of Cold Harbor. This battle happened in the northern part of Virginia. It shows the conditions that Civil War soldiers had to face while being in the war. At this part of the war, in 1864, West Virginia had already seceded. Western Virginia, from the beginning of the war, wanted to secede from Eastern Virginia. Eastern Virginia did not support these thoughts. On occasions, they even lashed out as a response. According to the historian John Schaeffer, Confederate troopers constantly raided into Barbour County, stealing horses and robbing stores at every opportunity. There are reports in Barbour County of Confederate soldiers who would come through and burn down buildings that belonged to individuals who supported the secession of West Virginia. This was not uncommon for soldiers to steal from civilians and take their food and destroy their crops, and take any supplies they thought necessary. This is a photo of Barbour County, West Virginia. This is where Confederate troopers would constantly raid and take any food and destroy crops for the civilians who were supporting the secession of West Virginia. The secession line marked primarily through the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Shenandoah River. Through all the tensions in the state of Virginia, in June 1863, the western part of Virginia would finally have their wish. Through many conferences and conflicts, Western Virginia would secede from the state of Virginia and become their own individual state that would be called West Virginia. They would be the only state in history that would secede without the permission of the original state. My ancestor, Stephen Davis II, was more than likely a part of their support to secede from the state of Virginia, along with many other soldiers. Life during the Civil War in West Virginia and many other states was hard, not just for the soldiers, but for the families on the home front and the civilians as well. These 4 years were full of starving, wounded, scared individuals who were all trying to fight for what they believed in. According to authors Cecile Abai and David Hunter Strother, they explain, "We are making history which will make the 19th century memorable. It will one day be considered a great privilege to have lived in these days." Despite the struggles, men fought in what they believed to be right. My ancestor, Stephen Davis, was one of the very blessed soldiers who survived the Civil War. He got to return home to his family, where he began his life again on the Dudridge farm. He now resided in the new state of West Virginia, just as many others. My family resided in the state of West Virginia for over 100 years after the Civil War. Despite the pressures and tensions between these two states, many other families as well stayed in the state of West Virginia.